So I was in Korea and I went to get my passport pictures. So I went with a colleague. I had to go pick pictures right away. But I go there, I take the pictures, and then I hear them talking in Korean. I had no idea what they were saying. And they print out the pictures and then put it in an envelope and goodbye. As I was walking, I look at my pictures. I look younger. Like, how is that possible, right? I was talking to my coworker. I'm like, did you guys talk about something? Or like how come? It's like, oh yeah, he asked if you want your hair darker. So I said yes. I'm like...
You're listening to Science Means Business, the Helical Brew series where science hits the market. Today's guest, Constantine Radu, commercial leader at Molecular Devices. Welcome to Helical Brew, episode I don't know what, because I don't determine which episodes. Although I will reveal on this episode that we are recording on a special day. Dun, 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 dun. That doesn't sound very Halloween, but it is Friday the 13th. I'm going to reveal... Cut that out if you want, Sura. Okay, fine.
I was like, oh man.
By the way, the mysterious disappearing chair may appear or reappear depending on, or disappear depending on. Oh. It's yeah. Well, I've been having. I had some trouble on Teams earlier with these LED panels, so I don't know. Welcome back, though, everybody, Helical Brew. And without further delay, I'm going to introduce our guest, Constantine, know you as Cons, Radu, who is the commercial leader over at Molecular Devices. Welcome, Con.
Great, thank you so much. It's a pleasure for being here, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
I think it's going to be an awesome conversation, and welcome to the podcast. We were kind of talking back and forth a bit about having you on the podcast, and I know we of course were all in Hamburg recently, which is really cool. That we often see each other in different continents, even though we live on the same continent.
You're right.
It's always
last time we saw each other was Spain. Yeah.
Right. Well, no, last time we saw each other was in Hamburg.
Yeah, but before that.
Fair enough.
But before that.
Yes. That's right.
But before that, yeah. I mean, but here's the thing: we're seeing each other somewhere in Europe, not in the U.S. But I actually, speaking of that, I am one thing you're involved with, and we'll bring it up more in the podcast. But you're involved with LRIG New York City, one of the founding members, I think, right?
Right. Correct. Yeah. I'm going our third year this year.
So we have two LRIG regional chapter foundation members, two different chapters, Elizabeth LRIG Canada and Constantine out in New York City. But I've been to some of the Canadian events. I would love to go to one of the New York City events because I always hear great things. I mean, come on, New York City. That's all. Yeah, exactly. Where do we go from there?
So you're in luck. We just announced, or we're going to announce, so actually this news, hot of the press, August 7th, we're going to have social event, a rooftop party, basically.
Okay,
so
I think we can make it work.
So I think that's a Thursday. We always do events on Thursdays.
Okay.
So that's, I think we're locked for August 7th, a rooftop party. So you can't really miss that.
A rooftop party. Well, I'm like,
in New York City.
It's got to be a surprise. Yeah, a rooftop, but in Manhattan. A rooftop party?
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
When you say New York City, it is Manhattan. Like when you say the city, that's what it is.
Well, yeah. I mean, having an aunt that lived in New York City, her part of New York City was in the plus 100 Avenue. Yeah, like way down the peninsula there.
I mean, I was in Queens forever, right? So like, I only moved to Jersey about 5 years ago. But yeah, I mean, like when I was in Queens, I would say I'm from New York City, but I would always say, Queens.
Right.
Because it's not quite the same thing.
Little detail, it's important, especially for those that are local, right? It's like,
of course.
Yeah, Brooklyn, Queens. But that's one of my favorite dialogue between Spider-Man and Captain America is like, hey, where are you from, kid? Queens. And Captain America says, Brooklyn,
right?
Shows the rivalry. Well, anyway, we are here to talk about you, and we're glad to have you with us. And the title of the episode, Scaling Lab Automation, Turning Automation into Business Success, which, I think you're in a unique position. I've been on the customer side, but in a medical device sense, not really in laboratory automation. But you've had the opportunity to be both a customer and a vendor in the laboratory automation life science community. So we certainly want to dive into that a little bit more. And I want to, this is, we're switching gears from other episodes. We've had fewer episodes in this segment, the Science Means Business segment, as we're calling it. And I think most of our episodes so far, I think we're up to what, sort of 5 episodes in the AI space?
Yeah,
right?
I think maybe
4 or
even
5?
6. Yeah.
Even 6? Wow.
Yeah.
So we've really been, looking into that AI and what it means to our industry. But there's also the business side of it where the rubber meets the road, as they say, and bringing solutions to customers in, solving real problems as vendors, as partners, etc. And of course, I don't, maybe you share my opinion. And one of my favorite things about this industry is that we all have to work together. No one company is producing everything you need for one solution. It's a great collaborative environment that we work in, and pretty fantastic. So everybody, welcome to the Science Means Business segments and the Helical Brew series that's spotlighting leaders who turn complex science into real world success. Today's guest is Constantine Radu, commercial leader at Molecular Devices, part of, forgot to mention that earlier, the Danaher family.
The huge Danaher family.
Constantine has built his career at the intersection of science, product strategy, and commercial leadership, helping scale innovative lab automation solutions across global markets and driving growth in the life science sector. So, Constantine, we always have an icebreaker. And crushed ice or cubes? That's always the question. No, it's only for Scotch tasting, which if you listen to previous episodes, you never use crushed ice and Scotch. But Cons, what is one hot automation trend right now that you think is just overhyped? I'm not going to say anything about it. It's not who's overhyping it or anything like that. It's just more of a trend that hasn't really launched, in general.
So I think, in my opinion, right? So I mean, from what I'm seeing, and I've been at trade shows since 2005, right? Before SLS was SLIS, right? Before, so I've gone to trade shows quite a lot. So far, what I've seen in the past, I would say 4 years, it's really the mobile robots. I think a lot of companies are there's one company that came out with it first, and then little by little, there's more and more companies out there with that solution. And I know there's a lot of work done to get to that point, right? Because development to actually get a mobile robot, to get a robot on top of a base, to be able to have the right sensors, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And so I don't want to knock that, but I think it's more on the infrastructure. So I think on the customer side, I think the vendors are ready to have the solution being implemented. What I think is the customers aren't quite ready to accept it. And I'm a science geek. I've done science Olympiads and all that stuff. I would love to see that. Like when I was in the lab, at Sloan-Kettering, I would have loved to have a little robot go around and just move plates around for me. But the infrastructure isn't there. The labs aren't quite set up for that. And, having worked, at Sloan-Kettering for about 10 years in our HTS core facility, I can tell you the number one department that can shut you down within a second, it's safety. If you don't do it correctly, and if you violate any rules, then they can shut you down. So having a robot move plates around, I was thinking about it. Sometimes I did radioactive, assays on screens, basically. I don't think safety would allow that to happen. Like that, like to have something that, how do you trust that it can really work really well. So I know the vendors have put a lot of work into it. I just think that they're pushing hard where the customers aren't quite ready for it. I don't know, like what are your guys' thoughts? Yeah,
makes sense. I completely I understand where you're coming from there, and I think it's one of those things that needs to progress through a little bit of some refinement process. Try it out, refine, try it out, refine, but also refine the use case. I think the use case is, there are some ones that, going from, let's say, an LCMS, a mass spec department, back and forth between the sample prep, right? I mean, this is an area where it's nice to keep them conveniently separate, right? Not mix all these instrumentation in the same room because they really are two different departments. That's one case where I've seen it makes a lot of sense. And the transport requirements are pretty simple. It's a lot of plates or racks going into auto samplers. If the robot needs to change floors, right, you need to have the infrastructure to be able to control the elevators. That can be an optional thing. I mean, that actually exists within the elevator companies. They have those things, but you've got to implement it. You've got to have software that connects to it. And so I completely understand where you're coming from. I mean, the use cases are starting to build, but it's not something that was going to happen year one with a lot of that. So I hear you.
But it is interesting that like for this, the vendors are ready, right? And I don't know if it's the customers like don't want it, because from my experience, they are interested and they do get, for example, they get us involved to try to bring them in, and then they realize all the things that need to happen. Like, oh, there's need to be sensors on the doors, and we need to make sure everything is safe. And oh no, I need to cancel the project because EH&S came back and said we can't do it this way. So I think it's just a combination of really wanting it and just not being able to get through that hurdle of like, I'm really not set up for this, you know?
Yeah, I almost think that I think the best partner would be safety department first. The customer that wants it, right? So because they have to be the driving factor or force to want to put it in the lab. But the second one wouldn't be so much the accountant or the finance, right, for the funding, but really safety, to tell you what are the guidelines, what can you do, what can't you do.
Safety first.
Safety first,
Safety
absolutely.
first. Elizabeth,
Yes.
how about you?
Yeah,
Are you
it's
having
true.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know a couple of cases where safety has put on hold the entire project or simply shut down everything, even though the investment was made, the robot is there, but it was not passed through the safety team. So it's sad because technically the goal was to have the robot and do a lot of things even without the people in the lab, but unfortunately there are a lot of considerations that they didn't made at the time of purchasing. And those are robots that are very costly as well. So the investment that goes in, it's quite high.
So maybe it's a hot automation trend, but maybe not overhyped, just unprepared.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do on that space. But there are more companies doing it, as well as building like a proper guideline of how to implement and set up your space to handle a robot like that. So I know some companies that are putting together guides and documentation and kind of educating the client before they actually purchase. So that's good.
It is not, there are other instruments in this industry. I mean, we I think look at pipetters as, oh yeah, of course there's pipetters and automated pipetters and things like that. Those were actually new at one time too, a long time ago. And those required adoption because now you've got this motor-driven device with pointy things on the end and all these other considerations. I remember I went into a lab in Spain. I didn't know this instrument existed, but they were still using TCAN Genesis machines. Yeah, the predecessor to the Evo, right? Can you imagine? Yeah, and this thing, it'll take your hand off. It was enclosed and whatnot, but it had fairly basic considerations for safety. And then you see now in the modern versions they're using more evolved motor technology, where you can have better sensitivity. It doesn't crash as hard when it crashes and lose counts and all that. So. But I think this is a great spin into our first segment from the lab bench to the market. And I'm going to throw it out there. What does it really take to turn great lab innovation into a sellable product? I mean, we see things discussed as far as a process, a technology, whether it's an imaging technology or a pipetting technology or a dispensing technology, you name it, and then bring it into a commercial sellable product. Do you have any thoughts on that, Con? What does it take to make that transition from concept to something I can buy?
Well, like the saying, you build it and they'll come. Like if you build it, they will come. That's so wrong, right? So I think you have to know your audience. You have to understand what do scientists want, right? What do they need? And not just today, but 5 years from now, right? If you build a solution, that the market isn't ready to accept it, or it's too expensive, or they may have some challenges to adapt it. As cool as it may be, it may not be get implemented, right? So I think you have to know your target audience and what it can do, right? And sometimes the price may not be the factor to eliminate it, but it's really, can it deliver a solution for it, right, for us? So I, like the one instrument that we've done is that the CellXpress imager. So I'm gonna shamelessly, sort of talk about it because I was part of the core team basically to develop it. So it's a lot of understanding of what do we want to do with it, right? We wanted to have it done cell culture, and that's pretty much what it is. Like, so do you guys know about the CellXpress?
Yeah.
AI? Okay, great. So I think it came out last year. It's basically it's a large instrument, liquid handler, incubator, imager, right? So but it's meant to be in one piece. So we know that liquid handlers existed, incubators existed, imagers existed, and customers can easily put those together if that's what they wanted. But what most customers want, they want something that can just load things, the solution they want load on a platform. And just walk away, like truly walk away, right? So it was really intended to be used by biologists. So I'm saying that in the sense that it was intended, it was used, so it was developed to make sure that it meets a certain customer in mind, right? So not the automation specialist, which is what I was, at Sloan. That's how we started in the business. But it was more for someone that can just load the buffers, load the medium, and then it also tells you how it works. Like, say, for example, let's say you're running something over the weekend, you don't have enough tip boxes. It tells you, hey, before you go home, make sure you put, tip boxes. So it was really, again, like it was developed with a secret sauce, really the software, like, so with that in mind. And that kind of goes, with the AI discussion, basically. It's sort of intelligent. It tells you if you have enough buffer, right? Because again, if you have a long weekend, it knows if you have a holiday. So if the system gets deployed, let's say in Germany versus US, if on a Monday you have a holiday, but you don't have a holiday in US, then it would know that the German calendar has a holiday. That means you're not going to be you're not going to be here on Monday, right? So then it tells you, like, for 3 days you may or may not have enough buffer. Make sure you fill this up, basically, or same thing for the waste and all that stuff. So it was really taking a look at what can go wrong, right? So all the things that can go wrong, what people don't really prep for. Looking at all that stuff and then really looking at what the customers need, basically. So I think if you develop something with the customer in mind, it's you have you have a good product. If you just something that you just develop something and hope the customers come, it's going to be a little harder.
Yeah. Well, and so that, I mean, I'm glad you plugged that, right, that you were involved with it, and it's something you're currently involved with as well. So, but what was the point where it was decided this is something that's worth bringing out to the market, worth scaling, if you will, right? I mean, so for molecular devices as a company, as well as, I mean, obviously it's got to have a market, but I mean, what other qualifications come up along the way? Did you know going into it, yes, we can do this 100%, or was there some experimentation you kind of had to validate?
Well, it was the market trends, right? So we were at the point where basically customers were coming to us for imagers, right? So we're known for our imagers. And they said, okay, well, we want to get your imagers. We want to do these workflows. So they were buying the automated systems, right? So the robot, the large platform, basically, and everything else. And we kept looking like the interest of those kind of workflows kept repeating themselves. So then realized, well, the market is telling us this is what the workflows are going, right? And now, there are more papers coming out with sort of what, their customers working with organoids. And different cell lines, so 3D cell lines, basically. So we said, well, there's a need for that. So there's a market is telling us they keep buying those systems from us. How can we make it better, right? And also, how can you be unique, right, in the market?
Sure.
So then you look at developing some sort of solution for them. And again, it was more. They really picked my brain on what can go wrong in a system? What can, how do you improve it? And I was telling them, like, I worked with scientists with PhDs. They were super smart people, but when it came to tissue culture, they couldn't do tissue culture. All right. So then it's important to just, to be consistent, right? So you use the whole automated platforms, all the tools you have, to the best to kind of get the customers' cell lines moving along, right? And then passers and everything else.
Well, and cell culture and cell line development is such a huge topic right now. So perfectly timed with that as well. And I feel like, the other question we had was, what makes scientific innovation succeed commercially? I think out of this discussion already, there's one answer to that. It's like, listen to your customers, right? At the end of the day,
Right.
they're asking for things and they know you're capable based on past experiences with products. They're like, yeah, they're the right ones to ask. Let's ask and see if we can get that product from our favorite source. Anything you want to add to that in terms of what makes an innovation succeed commercially?
I think it's also like not over engineering products, right? So I think there's a balance of making it too complex, right? So sometimes why do some products fail basically, right? Is that you have them over engineered or over promised in terms of what it can do. So I think, it's more on, it is looking at the audience, right? So knowing your audience, like who's your target audience, but also looking at market trends, also working with the different partners within our Danaher family, right? So we talked about Danaher earlier, but it was more basically having, also talking to everyone else to see how they're doing and kind of do also get glimpses of what other customers are looking for. And then you kind of bring it all together basically.
But you talked about Danaher, right, and molecular devices and all the scientific innovations that are happening that may be brought up by a customer, maybe brought up internally. But how does the company kind of identify which innovations are worth scaling? Because there is part of the market need, and also, will it make money for us, right?
Right. I mean, there has to be a balance, right? So the perfect product would be it can produce great science and give you great answers to your scientific needs, right? It can also financially make sense for the company. So it has to be that balance basically. But that's through market research, making sure you also work with different partners, making sure you have the right products in place that can streamline the product, right? That can essentially, when you build it, it's easily accepted and it's easier to use as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Moldev has done right is that, you just not just focus on the device itself, but also to offer additional solutions or an automation part that, your team is working very closely with that to bring more to the solution that you're selling and not just the actual device that you offer to the customer. So yeah, I think that that's something that Moldev has worked a lot over these years to bring fully automated solutions for their customers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So again, like it's, I mean, for me is that, I talk to customers at, different crazy hours of the day, depending on the region, but it's really listening to also their workflows, right? So they we all do some sort of pre-sales with customers. We're trying to understand what they're working on. For me, it's really understanding the solutions and again, where are they now? Like, what do they want to do now? And then where do they want to be in 5 years? And I think developing solutions for them, I think that's key, right? And that's one of the things that sort of like gets me up in the morning or at 3:00 in the morning, or depending on when the customers are ready to meet. The earliest appointment that I ever had was 3 a.m. in Singapore. So that was 3 p.m. for them, and I said that is the only time I can meet you. You can make it or not. Like, yeah, I'll be there, right? So woke up.
Is that an early appointment or a late appointment?
Well, it was afternoon for them. Then that was like the only time they could make it.
No, I meant for you, yeah.
It was like really early. But, it's just a matter of having that discussion with them. And, it's also about building a relationship and really being there for them, right? So I'd like to see that, hey, like I'm going to get up that early. They know it's going to be that early. But it's really, ultimately, they might feel sorry for me a little bit for like maybe a few seconds, but ultimately they want to listen to what is the solution that we want to provide for them. So that, that was an important meeting that I took, because later on they actually did purchase a system from us. So that 3:00 phone call was totally worth that, right? Because ultimately they ended up with a solution from us.
Oh, good. Right. It's worth it.
Right.
Well, okay. So in terms of like challenges out in the marketplace, right? We just talked about a product that was really bespoke creation to, in response to customer requests. Beyond that, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges in lab automation today? And just to give some background, we've talked a bit about, like, in these AI series, we've also sort of, what are the biggest challenges in using AI, for example, in this industry, and there were a lot. And there's a lot of companies that are founded just on solving those challenges, bringing it into the market in a usable way. But I feel like, there's still, within AI aside, in the industry, there's still challenges that are, need to be overcome, or can be, the improvement can be had. What are your thoughts on that?
So when we're talking about smaller systems, right? So basic systems, it's having the customers trained, right? So I think there are times when a lab can't really afford to hire an automation engineer. So they're going to have PhDs, biologists, basically, that are growing their cells, that are looking to adapt automation in their field, not providing training for them. Like, I think the adaptation of automation becomes challenging for them. So I think that's one challenge, that if it can't really be accepted, or customers may have a bad experience if it's not done properly, right? So, it's not just dumping a box on their bench and like, good luck. It's really walking them, through the whole challenge. And this is how you train, this is how you turn it on. So I think having, like, not implementing those things can be challenging. It can be challenging to customers, right? So I think, it's important to have basically a way to train them, and also repeat training sometimes with them. The one thing that, like, that's fantastic that Redisoft does is the hub. When our customers purchase our solutions, we tell them, hey, they have a great resource. Go get trained on that. So sometimes we actually have them get trained on the software before it gets, like, we even get the system in their in their install, basically, right? Because they're now comfortable, they understand the basics, we implement it, and then we go through the software. Now it's not new, it's not something new for them. So again, it's about implementation of the right way, right? And I think that also comes to how I experienced automation, and then how I learned it. Like, for me, I had a 5-meter track system at Sloan with 20 instruments. I got trained in 2 days, and good luck. So I'm like, okay, well, so I mean, I had a great boss. He's, it's like, you can make an omelet without breaking some eggs. So just don't make the same mistake twice, kind of thing. And I had an F3 robot, the one that if it hits you, basically. So you would feel it. So I bent quite a few fingers along the way, but I was sort of self-taught, I guess. Like, I used the user manuals. I would beg for support, like, oh, how do you do this? And I would call them for, little things for like 5-10 minutes. I mean, over time, you build a relationship, with the vendors. But again, the implementation part was like, it would have been great to have more hand-holding, right, in that process. So it's not as scary, this thing that just sits on a bench, basically.
Yeah. Oh, well, it goes back to sales 101. When I hear that is, don't oversell it, and what you do sell, be able to train on it and deploy it and onboard people so that it's something they can use. I think, a lot of times the gap between where the user is and where they need to be in terms of knowledge and training it can be easily misinterpreted, right? Because getting the system specification is the priority up front, but then after it's sold and it's delivered, you have to bring all the users in on the system and be able to operate it correctly.
Right.
So that's
but
same in robots. We have the same challenge. It's like, well, and we've gotten very good at having that discussion up front, because I've worked with robots before, but let's just double check a few things and make sure we're on the same page. And usually it ends up, like in our case, it's actually easier to use because you're not having to use the massive programming language, but you still want to have that discussion because they might be used to something else. And this is going to be different. So you want to, point that out. But I mean, would you ever get just a side note, would you ever get a 5-meter track again? Would you say 5 meters?
No, I would not.
I've seen a few of those, and I'm like, wow, that is long.
No, it was gigantic, and it was one piece also, right? So we were on the 3rd floor in Rockefeller building at Sloan.
Wow.
So we were moving one block over, and we knew that like about 2-3 years ahead of time. So we had to buy while the building was being built, by the way. So so we moved to Zuckerman building, which is on 68th Street, I believe. So again, 1 or 2 blocks over. And so while the building was being built, we actually purchased a 5-meter track that was brought up to the 19th floor during the building construction. And we left it there for 1.5 years because otherwise there was no way to get it up there. So yeah, so that was fun. When we went to Turner, I think, because there were the guys building the building. Like, oh, by the way, can you take this track up there? So like, do what?
Before the walls are put in.
Yeah, before, yeah. So I mean, luckily there was a crane that that could manage all that stuff, but that was a fun experience.
Cool. Have you
But
ever
yeah,
worked?
to answer your question, no. And I actually advise customers not to. I think not to. And sometimes it's better to just get too many systems, because it's about a risk, right? Because you have
tied
so
up
much
on one track. Yeah, right. What are you going to do?
It's if the robot goes, if the rail goes, then like that's it. Or again, yeah. So it's about risk management, right? It's about managing risk and how much, it may be, there'll be a cost, right? If you buy two systems versus one system, but the risk outweighs basically, like it doesn't make sense like to have the risk basically. So like if the system goes down, basically your biology can be expensive, your library is expensive. You just need to kind of mitigate that and balance it basically.
Well, I think it leads into the next question is like, how do you balance and manage the cutting edge technology with the realities of business, right? I mean, there's some things that sound really, really great, and then like in reality, maybe not the best solution. I mean, we run into that all the time in robotics, right? There's a lot of conceptual robotic technologies that come out every year, right? It's just, I always call it's like there's a season of the year where things jump from academia into industry. And not all those things, really are going to make it, right, at the end of the day, as into business. But I mean, how do you balance that? Is it just really sit down with the customer and kind of talk through things?
It's really having them the early adapters especially, right? They're the visionaries. They're the ones that want the coolest toys and the coolest technology. Having a realistic discussion. And, I actually did that couple of weeks ago. I was actually talking to a customer. I want this, this, and this, and this. I'm like, okay, that's great. I listened to the whole conversation, but then ultimately, like, do you really need that right now? Like, do you have the SOPs in place? So it's listening to them, understanding where they want to get, and then providing solutions that would make more sense for them, right? So again, smaller work cells, for example, it's something that less risky versus a larger platform, right? So the customer's looking at the CellXpress with other workflows basically for it. I'm like, I said, well, it's easier if you just get the CellXpress, you develop the solutions, have smaller system or robot that can feed plates for something else, like part of the workflows, versus to put all your eggs in one basket. Like that could be scary, right? Like, because again, it goes back to if the robot is down, then what do? You have to basically go back into a manual mode. And so it's one of those things. And by the way, we do use the Brooks robots. I don't think we ever had an issue with it. I mean, like I know I said robot goes down, but in reality that actually never happens. So maybe I shouldn't have said that. But it's that is true, like, because we had
some
systems
other robot
deployed I mean, that's true, but we had systems deployed in like from Hong Kong to Korea to Japan to you name it, like, right? And they survived the shipping and everything else, and it's a great arm, right? So I think that's part of the reason also we use it in our systems, because you want dependability, and I think that's when it goes back to the customer. When you build those solutions, you want them to have something that's reliable, that they don't have to call you every so often. Also, like, the business is small. I mean, it's big, but it's small. Like, it's reputation matters, right? So I think if you don't have the right tools in place, then that can affect your reputation.
Yeah. And as solution providers, hardware providers, we're in the position, it's like, well, we know where the hardware is applied best, the specifications, we know all those things. And, look, part of this industry is working on the cutting edge, and customers have to work on the cutting edge within science itself or even using certain technologies. But I think, that question is really touching on what you said about balancing risk reward and balancing what you need from us as the system providers, the hardware providers, right? And where we can provide the most robust solution. But at the same time, there's going to be risk taken, maybe just, having that all on the table of what's part of that risk, what instruments and devices are involved and which ones aren't. And certainly the last thing you want to deal with, a robot just moves stuff around, of course, right? You want certain instruments, you just want to put the plate in, do the job, move on, right? And I can appreciate that. And you've worked in Korea before. You've seen these technology implemented in various parts of the world. Well, you have a global role anyway.
Right.
But having worked there as well, I mean, are there some lessons you can highlight that you've learned and you've seen maybe the companies you've worked with learn from scaling products globally and deploying all over the world?
Yeah, so I worked in Institutpester Korea. So Institutpester basically has about 33 branches all around the world, right? So it deals with infectious diseases for the most part. So I think our branch in Korea, I was dealing mostly with infectious diseases. So TB, hepatitis, and also like some other nasty bugs like leishmaniasis, stuff that I did not know about until I actually got there, to be honest. So it things that can actually affect the whole country. So the science was amazing. The impact that we had on the world, I think, was phenomenal. What I learned is that I sort of had a different experience, I guess, right, in terms of the service. From service side, we had some challenges. For example, vendor would be a bit slower, right? Like in here, for example, I can call a vendor, is responsive really fast. There I had some challenges. So I think it was important. I think as I'm in my commercial role, basically, I had discussions also with their service managers, globally, is that it's important to be responsive, right? So to kind of have the same responsive time. That's what I was basically told when I got there. We had some liquid handlers and some other instruments, and we don't get the same service basically as you get in US. Like, nah, what do you mean? Like, I have my connections. I can get this done. So I'll call this person from that company. Like, I've worked with them for 10 years. They'll be responsive. And then I would call them and say, hey, I have this problem, all stuff. Like, oh, Cons, I'm sorry, different region. Like, what do you mean? So what I learned is, again, like, you have to get sort of prep for it. Well, what I did with our team basically is that we ordered parts, we ordered extra parts, and we learned the systems, right? So we can, if something happens, we ourselves would just replace things. But I think, again, what was important, that lesson was for me, was that having moved, I guess, commercial role and understanding the customer's perspective, that I took that basically that, hey, it's important that we provide that solution for them. So we've hired the right people also in terms of having the right automation experience and supporting the basic instruments. And I think those are there, right? But being able to support automation and also application support. So I think, that having the infrastructure is super important.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. We run into that ourselves as we, early in the Precise days, got bigger and went to more corners of the world. Company is still around 28 people at the time. And how do you do that? And it was, training up partners. And also in other parts of the world, I realized, Australia is a great example. There's a lot of business that's done through distribution, even full lab automation system, like an entire custom solution. Quite often they have local distribution because just the way the tax system and the import system is all structured. So you have to work with that too, right? Because the distributor is going to be the local service provider, representative of your company. So
for sure.
I know, Elizabeth, you've had to manage that for delivering systems or software around the world.
Yeah, and one of the things that Cons mentioned before, that's why we created the hub. So we kind of provide that to our partners so they can do training at their own time, also in the different schedules, and provide that to their customers as well so they can get the training that they need. So we cover some of the areas like educational part as well as support questions can be asked through the hub, and we're building a community of users there as well. So it's kind of like trying to empower the customer, to encourage them to learn and to try. One thing that one of our engineers used to say all the time is like, if you don't break it, you're not learning. So go ahead and, just try it. And the nice thing about now is we have the collaborative robots. So the risk is very low in terms of damaging the robot or the devices as before, if you were using the industrial robot type. It's a lot simpler to learn. Even if you don't have a background in automation, you can really get hands-on with a little bit of training from the support side of our company. You can start using the robot, teaching the robot, running and building workflows as well. So I think in that sense, we align a lot with your team, Cons, that we want to make sure that the customers utilizing the system at their best capacity.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I was going to add is basically, what works in US doesn't work in other regions, right? So what works in, say, US or Europe may not work in Japan or Korea in terms of the systems, right? So they may do different workflows. They may do different experiment. And also the customers have different demands, I found, than in US. Everyone reads sort of the same papers that come in Nature, that come in Discovery from SLAS. So it's about like understanding that science and sometimes trying to replicate that. But I think the implementation and also like their thoughts of automation are different. So we had a customer in Japan where we're delivering a reader feeder system, an imager essentially, and they were reading fixed plates. So our solution is basically just 2 hotels, imager, robot, just basically next to each other, has a lower, so you don't have to actually, the robot basically, it's sort of, you save a few seconds here and there, right? By having everything super close to each other. So the customer said, well, actually it wasn't the customer because we had to go through our local rep. It's like the customer wants one small addition, like small modification to the system. Like, sure, no problem. What is it? Can you put the hotels on a corner of the table, angled at 45 degrees? So the question is like, why? Right? So what's the reason behind it? They think that's the most efficient way. Okay. So we didn't actually build a system. We're about to perfect. We changed up the plan, then, did the redrawings and everything else. We matched exactly what they wanted. We leveled the hotels at 45 degrees as they wanted. And again, it was about understanding that's what they want, but we'll make it happen. Then he came back and said, can you make a workflow that they load the plates in the nest of the barcode reader, and then manually, from there, the robot takes the plate and loads individually in the hotel. Like, well, the hotel has little grooves, you can just put the plates there and it just does it for you. Like, what's the reason behind it, right? So we thought there was maybe different reasons why someone may want that. But it was, so we had to drill down a little bit more, like to understand the thinking, right? So sometimes there's some requests that it's just, it needs more conversations. And I think so at that point, we built that workflow for them, but we want to really understand the reason behind it. So they said, well, I don't trust my students to put the plates in manually, in the hotels. So they're still going to be taking it from one nest, but the robot will take it from that nest and load it individually into each nest in the hotel. I'm like, but that's I get it. Like, I'm like, but that's like such a waste of time. Like, kind of defeats the purpose of the automation a little bit. But it was about like him not trusting the students, right? So I said, well, again, we can train your students basically in how to load the plates and just to make it work. Sometimes you get different customers, different experience of automation, and
Sure.
It's just a matter of like having a discussion with them, trying to understand where they're coming from.
Can set the stage for all future use of automation, right? The skepticism, all that. So
right.
It's really important to, get the caveats out of the way. Yeah, the worst thing for me it's something in robotics is to, there's this process. Oh yeah, you have to bump this nest and then press the button and then the system will go. Yeah. You just have to, oh no, you didn't do it right. Like, there's some tacit knowledge involved in using automation that's like, oh, that's not good. But we learned from that, and I think it becomes part of our messaging for the next customer, right? Help them avoid those situations. And I'm curious. So over the years, I've noticed some collaborations within the Danaher companies, and one I really followed closely when it was the Echo and the CellXpress, right? The connection of the Echo, going straight into the LC, and I thought that was a really fascinating application, but also a cool collaboration between the companies. I mean, are there some things that are public knowledge that I'm not aware of that's happening within for MolDev within the Danaher companies, and influencing kind of bringing two groups together and collaborating on products?
So we do that all the time, I guess, so in the sense that Danaher is like DBS. It's a Danaher Business Systems, which is really a framework that works, right? It's basically following some guidelines that just work. So it's like you go to the gym, right? You do biking, right? So you have a schedule, right? You follow protocol, right? You basically you have to regiment basically, right? So I think that's what it is. It's basically following processes that are proven, that we know are established, that work. And if you follow it, you're good. If you don't follow it, then you're not. So I think like that's really the core of it. And then that really every company that's within Danaher follows the DBS process, right? And it's about like finding synergies. So we worked with Beckman, where basically depending on the solution, we can say they provide solutions that work for our customers, right? So it's about the customer to have an overall Danaher solution. We go in, for example, to some customers, if we need a liquid handling process, we bring in our Beckman reps, right, to come with us to make sure that the customer gets the best solution, basically. Because I think ultimately when we do that, it's also there's a greater warranty. We also, if we have any challenges, then we work with each other to make sure that we resolve it, basically. And that's the one thing, right? What I've experienced in the past as a customer, I would call one vendor that was the integrator, and they're like, "Oh, it's not my problem. You have to call that guy to resolve the solution." And it was finger pointing. And that's one thing as a customer, you don't have the stomach for it. So I think for us, we found that there is synergy in between us to develop workflows that work well together. So I think there's always synergies and collaborations. And, it's encouraged to do that, basically. And again, it's about finding the right solution for the customer of what they need. We try to find the right solution for the customer.
Yeah, it's a cool. I mean, each company bringing really high technology to the table when you have all those resources available under one roof. That's really nice to be able to collaborate at that level. I think it's a unique arrangement with the companies, having worked with Danaher companies for me, over 14 years, and the vendor side. And so it's pretty cool to see how that works and get to know it.
It's interesting to see that over the years, like last couple of years, Danaher has really put themselves to show their brand and who are the companies that are together with Danaher, because at SLAS, you can see their booth and, everybody's together in there and they are making that effort of branding themselves and showcasing that family of companies. So that's interesting for me.
So headed into the future.
The future.
We're traveling into the future.
Right.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh, and it's not that far in the future, because I don't think 5 years is even a really long time. We were talking about that in our last AI episode, where like even talking about 6 months is like eons in the AI world. So we'll just say, I think, the 5-year mark, right? Where are the more exciting opportunities in the next 5 years in lab automation specifically? Okay, anything could be on the table, of course, right? Software, hardware, everything in between. But what do you see as, at the 5-year mark? Yeah.
I feel like, and let's like, because it's open to debate, right? So I feel that the AI-driven automation, it's sort of the next step, right? So in a sense that there's machine learning processes, right? So then you load your plates, it does the imaging, it finds your hits, you can do cherry picking, right? If your compounds, it does those response plates for you, and then you can start screening it. So I think to that extent, that'd be cool to have, for example. So what I used to do that would take me weeks or months when we do screening, I think you can sort of implement that to have the whole platform do it for you, right? So if you connect everything, basically, and you have your imager, robot, liquid handling process, so now you don't need more than that, basically, right? But it's the idea of having that platform run on its own. I think that would be ideal to have long term, as well as maybe like cloud connected labs, right? Again, I think there's some companies that already sort of exist, but it's really where enabling remote collaborators to make decisions. So you can load your workflows from afar, basically, and you have maybe some CROs that can just run the platform for you.
Okay, so remote resources, in other words, things you don't have to have necessarily in building, but you can pay to use somebody else's. That's because I've heard the cloud infrastructure. I've heard different angles on it within the industry, but that to me is the one I'm most familiar with, like Emerald or
exactly.
Some that don't exist anymore as well. I mean, that's another area, like mobile robots on a bigger scale, that has had a fair amount of experimentation with regards to how it's implemented and what the hook is, right? Whether it's designing experiment focused with software, and then we have a back end lab behind that, or it's just a raw resource where you can run your experiment remotely. But I feel like that's if you want to stay competitive in this space, unless you're a really massive company with the ability to afford all this stuff, you really have to use these resources. You can't afford to buy $20 million worth of gear and when you can just rent it. So, okay. And we have to ask the AI, I brought it up multiple times, but how is AI reshaping or not reshaping from your perspective? And I was going to lead the question, but I'm not going to lead this question. I'm just going to go, what do you got?
Just mic drop it.
Yeah, we're mic drop this one. Yeah. Mike, drop the mic.
I think it's definitely reshaping the automation strategy, right? So again, like we have it implemented in our CellXpress, right? So it's the technology is there. Like it is making decisions for you. It's telling you, hey, you may need buffers, you may need plates, you may need, tip boxes. So that's also there, right? But it's not fully replacing manual tasks, I guess, right? So I think it's a balance of what are you trying to do with it, right? I mean, AI can also be as powerful as basically as the algorithm, right? So the algorithm can be built to a certain extent, but if it's not implemented correctly, it can also lead to to challenges. For us, I do feel that we've implemented it in our imaging, the way we do our images, and also the image analysis through AI and through CellXpress. Again, like that is the powerful tool and providing that to customers, right? But overall, I think it's still new of what it can and can't do, I guess. I think definitely whoever has the best tool sort of can lead the market, especially in the integration platforms, right? Having the right tools in place, because it's about decision making, and it's about quick decision making, and then retweaking your science. But yeah, I would love to get your thoughts. What do you guys think? Like, what have you heard from different experts?
Well, two areas that have come up for sure is not that far off from the technologies that are most useful in vehicular automation. It's not the self-driving part. It's the part that keeps you in the lane. It's the part that anticipates braking before you can. All these things using the computing power to your benefit, right? And that's not AI. I'm just speaking of, it helps keep the car on the rails so that you can, drive it in a way that's going to be less likely to result in a crash. I feel like in experimentation, AI has been very much around, or the use case today has been very much around keeping the experiment on the rails for a couple of reasons. One, the actual process, there's a lot of room for mistakes in setting the experiment up. The AI can analyze things and say, well, there's like 1,000 people out there that did this. You don't want to do it that way. Yeah, because they all failed, right? It has all this information that would take you much longer to research, where it can work off of this database. So it's helping, keep it on the rails, keep it in the path to success, but also making the decisions about, optimizing the experiment itself. Are you going like in a screening application, right? Or an imaging application, either way, where you've got tons of data to work with, but then you don't really need to look at all of it, right? The AI is helping you look in the right places, those kinds of things, or do some of that analysis for you. So it's not the big grandiose, AI, it's like doing everything for you. It's just saving you potentially a ton of money and also a lot of time in that. So I think what you mentioned aligns with a lot of what we've heard from our customers. I would recommend, have you watched the Ingrid's episode? That's a fascinating one in terms of like what she's doing with artificial intelligence. Yeah, check that one out. And for viewers as well, I highly recommend it, as with all of our episodes. But we've got another one coming up that's going to be pretty awesome too.
I think what's exciting for me is that I think there is the AI of different industries, right? You have it in lab automation and computing. My son is playing with with AI, and he developed his own model basically, and it's like, see, I have my own ChatGPT basically at home, which is pretty cool.
That's cool. How old is he?
15. So
wow, very cool.
So he loves, his stuff, but like it's, he has the tools, with his fingerprints, and like fingertips to actually develop it, right? So the different areas. So I think what's the most exciting for me is that, though I'm no longer in that industry directly, but, in terms of drug development, I think that would be exciting to see where you can get therapeutics much faster, basically, right? So I think you get your drugs, you have, you can do the experiments in a faster process, in a faster way, I guess, in a really AI-driven platform. And, there are companies that are sort of doing that already. Some pharma companies doing that, but it's, it's really it's exciting to see that. I think that can also drive the whole process of drug discovery much shorter. Where before it would just be years, now it's much, it could be much faster. And you pair that with the CellXpress, basically that can help you with your cells. I think that a combination, it can be much, much faster in terms of drug discovery. But again, remains to be seen, I guess. Like, I think the one thing that I feel like maybe needs to be more, like some regulations around it.
Yeah, and I think that's developing, right? As with anything that's new, it kind of sprouts up in an as needed basis.
Right.
But it's interesting because you've worked across both science and business, right? And it would be interesting just what are these leadership lessons that you've learned that kind of bridge both of those experiences that you've had to now you're global commercial facing, where before you were working within the science realm, right?
I think it's really, for me, was the ability to learn different languages, like meaning that there's a certain way you speak to scientists, a certain way you speak with,
I was thinking like Korean.
No. Oh, I wish I learned Korean. I think that was my biggest mistake of not learning it. But I mean, I think it's like understanding the languages between scientists and commercial, right? And also, like you talk to customers, like what drives each person, right? What drives a scientist? What do they want to accomplish versus what drives a commercial person? Like, I'm going to talk to leadership, for example. And also, I think for me, it's, I do love my job because I do get to actually be that bridge in between also. Because if I give an executive summary from a scientist perspective, it'd be 5 pages long with a lot of technical information. Whereas they just want to see a paragraph, give me the bullet points, what can we do? Done, right? So I think it's like, for me, like it's exciting to be able to kind of bridge that, right? To understand, to kind of talk to the scientists, understand, or the engineers in our case, to understand what they're trying to accomplish, what is the solution, what we can provide, and then, really talking to management of how that solution will be implemented, and also how it benefits the overall strategy for the company.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one thing that takes a lot of learning, right? Because you speak certain ways when you're doing science with scientists than when you're selling something to scientists or thinking about what they might need in the future. So it's definitely interesting.
Right.
Just for the future generation, you've got a son, you say he was 15. Some of our listeners are aspiring, a place where they're either choosing studies or they're in, working towards biology and all the different fields we hear about that are the basis of becoming a lab automation or having a lab automation career. I mean, I came from robotics, kind of really did a deep dive on the lab because I love the industry so much. That was the main reason. It's just, slapping car bodies together with robots is cool for a few years, but it sort of dies off because you're like, oh, gosh, when they're unpainted, they all look pretty much the same. And I know Porsche fans would probably hate hearing that, but sorry, it does. The craftsmanship comes from what's later in the process. But I mean, there's a lot of work that's done in that industry. I'm not negating it. It's just when you look at this space, it's so dynamic, and there's certainly skill sets that are important. And do you have any advice for young folks aspiring to be in laboratory automation,
right,
for their future?
I'll give the same advice that I give to my son, actually, right? So I think, it's definitely know the physics, know the math, know the sciences, right? I mean, definitely be, invest into learning that, right? So I mean, definitely know your stuff, right? Like in terms of being technical. But I think what's really important is really knowing the soft skills. And I think that's equally important. I think once you reach a certain point, I think you have to invest in soft skills and being able to understand how to speak, how to get your message across. You can be the most brilliant scientist, but if you're just not providing that information the right way, right? And that goes for like maybe, someone who's going to a venture capitalist and trying to sell their science, right? And say, hey, this is the amazing idea that I have. If you're not getting the message across, you may not get your funding, right? The venture capitalists may go somewhere else. So I think that soft skills is really important. Yeah. And really empathy, like really lead with empathy. I think understanding people, right? Because I mean, as leaders, as you're growing your teams, it's important to know to really be there for your team, right? So I think that because you're ultimately you're not much without your team. Like being a leader of no one doesn't help anyone, right? So I think it's important to really have a strong relationship with your team, listen to them, not always agree with them, right? But it's getting the right understanding, I guess, right? So I think that empathy is super important. And I've learned that through my years of experience, I guess, with different people, right? I've seen great managers of like how they approach certain things. And again, I tried to take the best from each one, basically.
Awesome.
And also, like, for me, it's like, also never stop learning. that was the one thing that also, as a leader, you can stop learning. Like for me, AI, I'm still, it's just a black box, right? I still don't fully understand it. When I joined the commercial team, I was dealing with finance and I was looking at spreadsheets and P&Ls and like, I don't know what this means. How do I make this better? Let me take an accounting class, right? Yeah. Finance and accounting. Great. Check that box, a few months later. Oh, okay. Now I get what they mean by that. So I think like, it's those little things that if you don't know something, take a course. There are free courses online or, find a YouTube video, but I think it's important to always keep learning. I think that's always important. But again, I'm going back to the advice again that I give my son is soft skills. Like know your stuff, know your math, and all that stuff, but you have to have the right soft skills also.
It's an industry driven by people. Working with people is something we're going to do every day, and so fantastic advice. Yeah, great advice, Constantine. Thank you for that. And it's time for our very world famous, globally distributed pick of the week session. Cons, what is guess first, right? I really can't wait to show my pick of the week, but I'm not going to hold back. I snuck it in. I snuck it in. Sorry. Yeah, you got a pick of the week for us? Can be a software or hardware concept, website, you name it.
So I do have a scary, today's Friday 13th, and I do have a scary story, and I'm gonna finish with that. But let me get to the pick of the week, because I do that's important for people that are screening, right? And I think that ties into what we've talked pretty much the whole hour. But I think for me is that I don't read books that much. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time. What I do is, to kind of keep up to speed with technology and see what else people are screening, what else is coming up. I'm an SLS member, and I do get the discovery and technology journals. So like when I get that the email, like, oh, there's a new article that came out, I spend about 30 minutes or so going through the abstracts. It kind of like keeps me up to speed what else is going on, I guess, in the world. So I think that's my thing that I sort of do, on a I guess weekly, monthly basis whenever the articles come up, and also whenever,
never stop learning.
Never stop learning, and
exactly.
Take advantage of the fact we're SLAS members. We have access to these things, right? There's a whole library of information we have access to that is all right there. I'm trying to get onto Connected more myself, and there's some great threads that come up there in terms of just users asking questions. I mean, it's a place where you can put anything from job postings to just open discussion about what's happening in a lab or trying to solve problems. So always cool to see that. All right, so we'll save your scary story for the end of the episode.
Sounds good. Okay.
Close it off.
As we will lower the octave of the voice as we go into the end of the episode. But first, what we're going to do is I've decided that I've been doing pour overs for coffee for years, and I also have an espresso machine, but pour over, I always like that because you're kind of in control of everything, how much coffee, the steeping, all that. But the thing is, though, I have, I guess I'm a klutz a little bit when it comes to these things because I've cracked both the mugs and I've cracked the pour over device. So there's one that is from a company. It's Hario from Japan, and they have done, I think, the perfect balance because you want glass. At the end of the day, you want the coffee to come in contact with the filter, the water, and the glass. That's it. You don't want plastics or anything like that. Plus, the plastics are going to absorb the coffee over time. I had one of those, and I'm like, it was impossible to get clean. It always smelled like old coffee. It was like, so this thing, right? And this is my backup. I actually got two of them in a package, so I've got one that I'm using every day. Anyway, it's a pour over device where you can actually separate the two and clean. So it's the
What's the name?
Hario. Company name is Hario. Comes with a little coffee scoop. You measure it out.
That's pretty cool.
And it's just simple little things, right? I mean, it's just one of those things where I happened to be at a Pete's Coffee and they were selling these things, and I bought a 2-pack of them.
You're so refined, Mike.
I know.
I only do pour over in the morning.
Oh, Smithers!
What, you don't drink with like your finger like this, do you? Like
what is this percolating thing? It's unbelievable.
Allow me a moment as I pour over.
Oh yes, pour over and have a nice water kettle. You can boil your water. I will say, speaking of the SLAS, I got a gift when I was in Hamburg that was fun. So my other pick of the week is my special badge that I got from the SLAS.
The voice of SLAS, nice.
He's the voice of very many things.
The voice of SLAS. Actually, it's
the
mostly
voice of reason.
Officially.
It's so far it's been a lot of passport to prizes, which I always get a kick out of doing that. Giving people free stuff, not getting any of my own, of course, but giving away Nintendo Switches and TVs, air tags. That's been a popular one, right? It's like, hey, track your bag. Yeah, the well-traveled. So that's my pick of the week. So tell us, please, do tell this scary story on Friday.
My scary story.
Dun dun dun.
This goes back to 2005, 6. Okay. So, I started as a chemist. I wasn't a hardcore chemist. So I realized that once I was in the organic lab doing small molecules, the smell just hit me. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this as a career. Though I love chemistry, it's just I need to find a different career path. And luckily, there was an HTS core facility that was opening up at Sloan. I think I bugged the hiring manager for months to hire me and to give me a chance. And he did, so I was like the first hire for the lab. I was also he also made me the lab manager. But then I was the automation scientist. So I had to manage all the screens. So if something happened, it was, my neck on the line, basically. So it was Friday afternoon, much like now, pretty much. I set up the screen. So before you run a major screen, right? So again, when you run a major screen, it's basically at least $20,000 to $40,000 of science, of basically consumables, media, everything. It's so much time to actually invest to get to that point. So I do a lot of, we would do a lot of validation, make sure the biology really works. Then I would just do dummy runs. So dummy runs basically fully load the whole system with just dummy plates and run it with water, right? To see if it fails at any point. So that was the important part. So that passed. So we moved to the screening campaign. And then I get home, I get a phone call from the robot. So the robot actually was connected to a phone line and it would call me. So I'm like, bugger. It's one of those things, it's Friday. Really? So then, yeah, exactly. It would...
Bugger.
I'm like, it was just not. So then, okay. So I would go VPN in. We had cameras. So that's one thing I always recommend to customers, that if you can, then again, talk to safety departments, make sure you're allowed to install cameras, but it's good to have cameras in your system so you can see what's going on. I saw that it stopped at an ambi store. I'm like, all right. So then what I did is I figured it's one plate, sort of manually drove the robot to that point. I removed it from afar remotely. I put the sample plate on the side. I'm like, oh, that's a waste. I'm going to retry and then hopefully that'll be fine. It died. It basically at that point said fatal error. I'm like, oh, great. So the only way to recover from that is you actually have to go in person. So I think I finally made it back around 7:38, and this assay was a little bit different or unique in a way, but because you had 2 different time points of incubation. So meaning that it added the reagent, it waits about 20 minutes, they add something else, and then another incubation time point. And it was, again, at that point, it was 8 o'clock. I had close to 400 plates ahead of me. I'm like, there's no way I can do this, right? So I tried repairing it myself. It just didn't, it wouldn't work. So at some point, I called my wife. I'm like, I don't think I'm coming home this weekend. Because I felt the pressure. I felt the pressure from my colleagues. I'm like, if I bust their $40,000 reagents and everything else, they're going to have my neck on Monday morning. So I'm like, yeah, just do this myself, sort of take away the automation, just do it manually. So I figured I'll just do one more try. And I called the engineer from Iconic. So it was Wes, right? So I call him up. I'm like, hey man, this is the problem. Like, I just can't get a thing working. Can you help me out? Can you give me, pointers over the phone? He's like, oh, are you in the lab? I'm like, well, yeah, what else would I be, right? It's like, I'll see you in 3-4 hours. And he hangs up. I'm like, all right. So I still remember this because, it's a story that I tell some people and I'll tell the punchline in a minute, but it's really like, okay. So I'm like, maybe not, right? So I started doing, I kind of got into a groove basically of making sure I have my incubation plates. And again, it's keeping track of a lot of plates when the first reagent gets added and the second reagent gets added, and then you have to do a readout. So it's, I kind of figured out some matrix. It was basically at midnight, security calls me. It's like, hey, there's people to see you. I'm like, can you let them up? Like, yeah, sure. Like, absolutely. Like, let him come up right away. And then, so, Wes shows up. And guess with whom? I'll give you one try. Long hair. Who else was there?
I don't think this is for me, this question.
Put me on the spot.
Oh, it's from Mike, sorry. Or maybe Elizabeth. Liz, you should know too. It rhymes with Cosmos,
is it?
Cosmos, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's what it rhymes with. You gave it to him.
Oh, actually, yeah. Well, I was going to say like cosmic, but yeah. So, like, he comes in, like, the coolest guy, like he was dressed very like European. He had the coolest tools, like tool bag, right? It actually looked like a briefcase. Mm-hmm. Takes it apart, right? Like, he comes in, takes the whole thing apart. It's done in 20 minutes. We reset the whole system. I was up and running, right? So that was my aha moment that I take to this day, right? Was basically customer service, right? I think, like, they came from Boston. Like, I mean, I'm sure they had fun. Like, they talked all the way to New York from Boston, and then probably went for dinner or just hung out, I guess, in the city till the next day. But what I learned is that basically that's important to be there for your customers when they really need you, right? So I think my aha moment was really, it was scary because, again, I didn't think I was going to go home that weekend. Like, honestly, like, I thought I was going to have to do everything manually. The fact that the vendor reacted the way they did was great because it was really about customer service, right? Yeah. They didn't have to, like, it was after hours, like, they didn't have to kind of take my phone call, right? But I think that that's something that was really important. And, for me, I kind of carry that every day when I do my job. It's basically just understanding, kind of being there for your customers. And that kind of ties into everything we talked about today. Like, it's really listening to your customers, understanding what they want to do, and then really supporting them. Because once the system is delivered, you also gotta support it
above and beyond. Yeah, I wasn't thinking it would be Cosmos. I was thinking it would be Steve, but that Steve came after this event. Yeah. So
right.
Yeah, they both have long hair.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Oh, you're right. Steve also has long hair.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
But it was
surely it wasn't Cosmos. He was happened to be in Boston people, right? That day. Yeah. Okay, he did. He happened to be. So cool. Thank you for sharing that. So we're glad to have you. We're glad to have you on the show today, this Friday the 13th, 2025. Thank you for coming and joining us on the Helical Brew. And we will release the episode soon. We got episodes coming out weekly right now. Anyone who wants to subscribe to us, you can always go to the podcast networks on Spotify or Apple and search for Helical Brew, or just search for Helical Brew on Google, because we basically own our Google results. We've got them all. We got TikTok. We've got YouTube. YouTube's probably the number one result because we've got more shorts than we have episodes. Absolutely. Which is kind of how it works, right, Sura? That's exactly.
And we are now, as of yesterday, on Instagram.
Wow, this is news to even me. So
yeah, you guys
we have an Instagram account. So we've, TikTok. Oh, sorry to break your heart, but we're on Instagram too. Facebook and the like. But the best thing is just like and subscribe wherever you go. That really helps us out and, lets us know that you appreciate the show. And also feel free. Comments are open if you want to do that, or email us at helicalbrew@gmail.com. Until next time, this episode of Helical Brew is brewed. We'll see you.
All right. Take care.
Is brewed. I love that tagline.
Thank you for joining us on the Helical Brew. We're glad to have you with us. For more episodes, please visit our website at helicalbrew.com. That's helicalbrew.com.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah,
How are you?
I'm good.
Are you cons?
I am the cons. Yes.
The
Like the
cons.
fawns, like the fawns, the cons.
Ah, my apologies. I thought you were scheduled for next week, not this week. I was expecting someone else.
Okay.
Is Mike on?
Mike is on.
Hey, Mike, isn't cons next week?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You are next week, Con.
Damn it, I just shaved for nothing?
Did you get dressed up for us?
Damn.
Yeah, how'd you know? But I'm
The
wearing
lipstick.
shorts, so
We are properly messing with you, Cons.
that's okay. That's good, that's good. Oh.
I was expecting more of a reaction. You let it go.
That's
too
how we
soon.
really break the ice.
That's good.